Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Democratic Television. I'm your host, Renee Hoyos, and I am so thrilled to be here with my favorite legislators, Gloria Johnson and Representative Sam McKenzie. Thank you guys so much for taking some time out tonight to speak to all the Democrats in East Tennessee and whoever can pick up this broadcast. We really appreciate it. We know that you are very, very busy beating back bad bills as they are served up to you in this crazy tennis match of legislation out there in Nashville. I want to thank you both for coming, and just I'd like to know, first of all, just a few minutes to introduce yourselves and just let us know how it's going there, what it's been like in the first 6 or 8 weeks that you guys have been there. Gloria, would you like to start? Representative Johnson.
Sure. Absolutely. Representative Gloria Johnson from House District 13. And I have to say, if there are any folks out there from South Doyle, I've had so much fun today answering your emails. A class or several classes at South Doyle have been emailing me about upcoming legislation, their opinion, whether they want me to vote for it or against it. I've had so much fun listening to them. But things are starting out fast and furious here. And like you said, we are watching them bad about this legislation. And much of it is really terrible for Tennessee. And more importantly, it's not addressing the major need that we have right now, the pandemic, the folks who are out of work, the folks who are struggling because of the pandemic, and the healthcare. Instead, we're talking about ousting judges from their positions just because they rule on the rule of law, about making it difficult for those students who are transgendered, and for trying to make constitutional carry in a time when we're seeing way too much violent crime in Tennessee. And these things are coming at you one after the another. Like, we had to decide which bad bills to talk about today because there are so many of them.
Yeah, it's just been like drinking out of a fire hose. I swear, just trying to track them all. Representative McKenzie, this is your first year as a state legislator, and I wanted to get your opinions about how it's going the first few weeks.
Well, it's definitely an extremely hectic pace. Coming in this COVID environment, I have nothing to measure it against in terms of what normal is like. This is my normal, but it is it's amazing the number of just bad bills, and they'll get amended to be even worse bills, and you have what I think is intelligent discussion. The Democrats bring up very valid issues, and they're just ignored, and the machine is just moving on. So it's frustrating, but it's also, I'm developing some relationships, and hopefully they'll bear fruit in the long run.
Yeah, I can only imagine how I'm sure it's weird and yet not weird. This is your first time. It's COVID, but you've been around, and so
Absolutely.
how it's supposed to be. It's just, I'm sure,
Yes.
very, very frustrating and difficult. And thank you so much for representing my district. Representative
Yes.
McKenzie is my representative, and so I'm grateful that you're up there, both of you championing common sense and good reason. Now, we did have to choose bills, gentle listeners, because the list was so long. Mm-hmm. And we are going to talk right now about 3 things that have come before the legislature that are really important this week. And that is the transgender athletes bill, the concealed carry bill that Gloria's got some interesting news from the Judiciary Committee, and the potential ouster of Chancellor Lyle, who is a wonderful judge in the Middle District. And I think we'll start off with this transgender bill that basically limits transgendered women from participating in women's sports. It's very specific about women's sports. Who knew the legislature cared so much about women's sports? Representative Johnson, what's your take on that?
Well, more importantly, they keep billing this as protecting women in these women's sports. which is very frustrating to me as someone who's been doing my darndest to get rid of a Republican member who admittedly molested high school athletes. And they weren't about protecting those girls when they agreed to investigate, but then refused to follow up with that. So if we want to protect female athletes, why not start by seeing who our members are and if they actually need to be in the legislature? The other part of it for me is we are once again trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. In multiple committees, they have asked for one example of this being part of the situation in Tennessee. It hasn't been, and we're not looking like we're going to see anything in the future. So once again, our legislature is set out to solve a problem that doesn't exist in our state, because 20 other states have got the same legislation. It's cookie cutter legislation that's going in around, and it's really about bigotry and about making someone the other. Mm-hmm. Folks who are vulnerable anyway to bullying, incredibly high suicide rates and rates of violence against transgender people. And so why are we contributing to that? Why is this an issue in Tennessee when we've got everything around the pandemic to do? It seems like targeted hate legislation. And quite frankly, all of the responses I've gotten are for us to vote no on this bill.
Yeah, Representative McKenzie, what are your thoughts?
Well, Gloria hit the nail on the head. Is, why is this before us? And I've said that, a dozen times. When I look at these bills, that's exactly what it is. There's this national mandate, and I think folks are just mindlessly pushing it through state by state, and it's our time in the hopper. It's just again, I don't know why we're having this debate right now. If it is a conversation, it should be had at the TSSAA level. That's one thing that just frustrates me in terms of when I served on county commission. All you heard was what we want the state to stop pushing things down on us. They're sending way too much legislation. They're passing way too many bills, and it was Democratic control. Now they have a super majority, and they're just micromanaging at levels that they should not. Again, it's just, it's a bill that I don't see why we're entertaining this, but it's passed the subcommittee and committee, and here it stands before us. And the last thing I'll say about it, an unfortunate thing, which a Republican member of the Knox County delegation sent a letter. Someone in Representative Manis' district came to speak on it, and they just treated this lady horrible. I mean, to get in your car and drive 2.5, 3 hours just to speak on it, just to have a dialogue. The votes are the votes, but to go after this lady the way that subcommittee did was just an embarrassment.
Wow.
And we've seen that a lot. This attack, we saw it today in criminal justice, where a member just attacked someone who was speaking on legislation and, slandered them basically. And the chairman didn't even stop that. This is kind of outrageous. Like, why not look to the NCAA, who's addressed this issue, or the Olympic Committee, who has addressed this issue? Somebody pointed out in the Senate, have you talked to a single transgender athlete about this? No, they have not. Have you talked to young people who are athletes about it? I remember seeing a documentary on college athletes, and they were totally welcoming. None of them had a problem with it. I'm sure that you will find a few who might, but overwhelmingly, the universities and groups that they talk to, the athletes there did not have a problem with it.
Yeah, and so we're spending taxpayer dollars and time going over this. Likely something might be litigated in the future. So now we've set us up for some litigation.
I was in litigation, I believe, over this same bill. They testified, someone from that lawsuit testified in the Senate.
Yeah, so there you go.
And we're going ahead with it
well,
anyway.
I believe the governor has put extra money in the budget for litigation for these bills. It's mind-boggling to me that this is going on. And I just can't believe it. The things I hear, and you guys are right there. So it must be extremely frustrating. I was on the Tennessee Equity Project's website today, and there's a slate of anti-gay, anti-trans bills. They're calling it the slate of hate.
There are 4 more, yeah.
Yeah, coming down. So it's just a real onslaught, like you said. This is a legislated bigotry, is all this is. And it's just a shame, a real shame. The next bill that we wanted to talk about was the concealed carry. Now, when I was at the legislature, legislating on clean water issues, people in the mid-aughts were really trying to allow you to pollute anytime you wanted, and they shifted their gaze over to guns and the water quality alone, and there was just a slate of gun laws that happened. And I feel like, didn't we legislate this already? Haven't we already talked about this? But they've come up with some new ideas. And Representative McKenzie, I would love for you to tell us what's going on there in the concealed carry world as you see it with this legislation.
Madness and insanity is what I would say in terms of that. I mean, there's just, and as Representative Johnson said, to sit and listen to the vitriolic conversations that's had in committee, they're just blasting a brilliant legal mind who happened to have a D behind his name was making some really, really strong points. And a person with no background, but by golly, he wants his 18-year-old to carry a gun, just call it ridiculous with no basis. So, it's unfortunate that we live in a state that has very few gun laws as they on the books right now. It went from an in-person class to an online class to now you can just carry. So, they are really, the one that gets me about this whole thing, when you boil it down, they're snubbing their nose at law enforcement. They are saying, we don't care what the police say. We don't care what the state troopers are saying. We don't care what the sheriffs are saying. We want to have our guns in and around ourselves, to hug them, clean them as you drive or whatever. And it makes no sense. It's going to put guns in folks' hands that are ill prepared to understand their power, to understand their use, and even the online class was really weak at best. But now just to say it's our constitutional right to carry, and they amended that bill in committee right now to take it from 21 and handguns to 18 and any type of gun, basically, any type of firearm. This is the part of being a legislator in the super minority that's extremely frustrating, because logic just gets thrown out the window. I will say our former governor did some things to stem that tide at least, but right now the floodgates are open, and I'm confident that there are several Republicans that don't like this bill, but they're going to vote for it anyway. And that to me is very unfortunate. And that's why I love being a Democrat. I can agree or disagree with you about a particular issue. I'm still a Democrat. With them, I think it's all or nothing proposition on these matters.
Well, that's what it appears to be. Representative Johnson, what you've been there a few times and have seen a few gun bills come and go. What's your position on this one?
And usually this one gets stopped, kind of like the transgender bills. A lot of time they get stopped in the Senate, but this year they're passing first in the Senate. At least, the transgender bill has. and it's very, very frustrating because they're terrible bills. And the kids at South Doyle, this is the bill that they're writing me about. And there's both sides of it, but I can tell you overwhelmingly, probably only 1/4 supported it and 3/4 of them did not. But the fascinating thing to me were a lot of the students who were against it, they respect the permit process, but they've had incidents of gun, they've had incidences around them. They told me about an incident where someone fired a gun around them, that sort of thing, and how they're scared. And so listening to these young people, they're sophomores, so 15, 16 years old, talk about the experiences that they've had around guns and how they would really hope that people have a permit. It's the common sense. And the reality is, not only is law enforcement against it, but the vast majority of Tennesseans are against this. And I bet you there's a majority in this legislature who are against it. But as Mackenzie said, many of them are going to vote for it anyway. And it's incredibly frustrating that we lack political courage so much these days. We've seen some from some of our friends across the aisle, but we are not seeing enough, because we could stop some of this bad stuff if people really would vote their conscience. So that's what we're asking people to do. And it's nice, like Representative McKenzie said, for me as a Democrat, I don't have to always vote with my colleagues, but my colleagues will not tell me how to vote. And there's, somebody might not be happy with a vote that I make, but we get past that. We understand. But it's really not tolerated very well on the other side. And it's unfortunate that we see so little political courage. What I'm feeling this session from people is more of retaliation. I think that they're very upset that they lost at the presidential level, and they're gonna own the libs. They're really gonna show us that they're in charge in Tennessee, and we're gonna do what we're gonna do. I really feel that strongly about some of the legislation that we're seeing from some of our most extreme colleagues. But if some of the other ones go along with it, then they might as well be just as extreme.
Yeah,
Right.
I'd like to chime in on that. I'm sorry, just to throw something that's totally unrelated, but it gets to what Representative Johnson said. Sitting in Transportation Committee today, and there was a question about electric vehicles, and one of the representatives went in on how this new administration is going to do away with gas engines, and it's going to mess up our taxing system, and they're basically getting electric vehicles for free. But it's just the anger of us properly electing a Democrat to the presidency was it's like more than they can take. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yes. And that does seem to be the sentiment across most of the South, that people are angry and they're gonna retaliate with voter suppression laws. They're gonna retaliate. And speaking of retaliation, they don't like what happened in the election process of the 2020 cycle, and now they're set to punish Chancellor Lyle by trying to use the legislative process to remove her from the bench. And so a couple of things I'd like for you guys to clear up for us. As I've been reading the news about it, people are talking about the effort as a bill and as a resolution. And so Representative Johnson, if you could clarify for us the difference between the two and tell us what's involved in this process and what a resolution is as opposed to what a bill is.
Well, this particular resolution, I got into reading the entire thing, and it's incredibly long, and it specifically lays things out. And it's really quite something. It asks for the speakers to form a committee with 5 from the House and 5 from the Senate, if it happens to look into it. But the reality is, it is unconstitutional. I mean, we've already got the American Bar Association, the Nashville Bar Association coming out saying, this is ludicrous. And if you look at it, there's 67 Republicans who have signed on so far. And I think it's every single one of their lawyers. You know, I'm not real sure where they went to law school, but every other lawyer that I have talked to, read about, anything, understands that this is outrageous, because the only way you can oust a judge is with cause, and there is no cause here. She ruled on the rule of law that was before her. And so in talking with our caucus and with attorneys, it's something that's not going to happen. But they're putting all of this effort into it. They're even so giddy. One of their members sent out an email, and they sent it to the entire body. Rep. McKenzie, I don't know if you read this email, but he said, "Oh, you know, representative of the week goes to Tim Rudd for this piece of legislation." And I'm like, I can't believe you guys really should just send that to the Republicans. You shouldn't send it to the Democrats. I think I'm going to respond. I haven't. I think I'm going to, just because he's an attorney. It's just shocking to me, the zealousness that they have to go after people who have an idea different from them, says someone from their tiny office. But you know, it's just their need to attack someone on the opposite side. When did it become that we can't tolerate different ideas from ours? It's ludicrous, but it's terrifying. It's terrifying to me. Think you can go after a judge because you don't like their decision on the rule of law. I mean, and now she's had to remove herself from another case, which is going to set that case back months and months. And then sometimes I wonder, maybe that's why they did it. Who knows? Was there another there?
Is that the voucher case?
It was one of the education, whether it's the one about the funding, the BEP, or the voucher.
The BEP. Mm-hmm. It was BEP funding in Davidson County. Yeah.
Right. So it's incredibly tricky what this has done, and it just has a chilling effect on the judiciary, which is our third branch of government that is critical to democracy. They're attacking democracy, in my opinion.
Well, and they have been pretty consistently, you know, and pretty directly on January 6th. Representative McKenzie, I'm interested in what in your perspective on this resolution.
I mean, you know, and you touched on it. It's the same vein that sent those folks to Washington, D.C. to do what they did on January the 6th. It's like someone comes down, something happens, and because I don't like it's sophomores. It's bad. As Gloria said, it's not going to stand up in a court of law. I think they know that. They just, I don't know if the government has said you got plenty of money to deal with lawsuits, so have at it. But it makes no sense. And you know, it's this state and this country was created brilliantly in terms of the clear divisions. And you really, you know, there's kind of been a code. You don't mess with the judiciary. They need to be as apolitical. They're going to make decisions that you love. They're going to make decisions that you hate. But they're going to do that, and you're going to allow them to do that. And this is it's insane. It gets to similar to the block grant that we had a special session on. I mean that they shoehorned in at the first week. The Biden administration is most likely gonna turn the corner of that, but they just want to close their eyes and force that square peg into the round hole. It goes to voter suppression. They're just hell bent. I hate that it's us versus them, but it really is. They're just hell bent on keeping the voter rolls pure in their mindset, and so that they can rig these elections. So that's it's not going to work. It's they're not going to prevail in getting rid of this chance.
Yeah, I'm just stunned at how now they are just openly saying we can't get elected. So in order to pass these kinds of bills that they're passing at the state legislature, and that eventually I think is, and then they've got all these voter suppression laws down. And you know, the demographics of Tennessee are changing. Might be a while. I might admit that. It could be a while. But at some point, this is all going to wrap around and bite them in the rear. And yet they persist. They keep going. They keep passing all these crazy bills. It's just, you know, I was thinking we should do like a 3-part series, or just have like a weekly on all the crazy that happens there. But Representative Johnson already is doing that on her Facebook page, and Representative McKenzie, I would encourage you to do one as well. It's always great to get the insights when you return home from session, because I think it's just pretty mind-blowing. And people need to understand. For years when I worked with the community, I used to say the one thing you can do is friend a legislator and find out what goes on there, because you would be surprised. And that's when it was relatively nuts. You know, now it's like completely bonkers nuts.
People, you know, people are watching more and tune in, like Brett McKenzie's talking about the way they act in some of these committees. All these committees are live streamed. If there's bills that you care about, you can tune into these committees while they're happening live, or you can watch them later that night after, you know, when you get home from work. I know everybody doesn't want to do that, but if there's certain bills that you're concerned about, tune in there and see how representatives treat people who come to testify in those committees, because sometimes your mind is just blown, like this one mother that Rep. McKenzie was talking about that was speaking on the transgender bill. She's a parent of a transgender child, and she just wants her child to be treated fairly. And it was like she was cross-examined like she had some horrible ulterior motive. It was just really, really ugly. And there should be no place in our politics for that. Even if we disagree with somebody, we can respect their opinion and not agree with it. I've had great conversations with folks on the permitless carry bill, the constitutional carry bill, that disagreed with me, you know, but we could still have a good conversation. And so we need to get back to being able to just disagree and not be disagreeable. And we certainly shouldn't treat people who drive for hours up here poorly because they wanted to come and give you their experience and their personal connection to whatever that legislation is.
Right.
Yeah, that's just really stunning. You know, that kind of thing used to happen occasionally, you know, and it used to happen to lobbyists, you know, and now I guess it just happens to everyone. And how sad that it happens at all, and with the frequency.
Absolutely.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us tonight. We'd like to give you a few brief seconds for some final words. Representative McKenzie, what do you see coming up in the future?
Well, you know, I'm excited about that. We can have a whole session on the bills that Representative Johnson and I are carrying, but I'm excited to do to try to push a few that's going to help in the field of education and true criminal justice reform. So it's I'm optimistic on at least having a good dialogue on it and try to keep moving that.
That is great. Representative Johnson, what are you looking forward to?
Well, yeah, same here. You know, we've got in our caucus, we've got a lot of good bills that help Tennessee families. I mean, that's what it's about. Making sure everybody has access to voting and making sure Tennessee families have what they need when it comes to health care and education, paid family leave, child care, raising the wage. You know, those are the things that we want to talk about. Criminal justice reform, voter restoration for folks who are not able to vote but should be able to because they've served their time. So just all of the things like that is we are excited about working for Tennessee families and not just pigeonholing these wedge issues that divide us and but really work on the things that we all care about, those kitchen table issues that hit every Tennessee family.